last year who's going to share for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then it's all of you guys.
Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We might have a few more people trickle in. We have a student from Trellis Round 5, 2017, Pete Nelson, who shared with us during the first seminar meeting on how to communicate with your organization. And then he'll be speaking again today, sharing his experiences about doing trainings. And so I think Pete's going to share for maybe 5 or 7 minutes, and then there'll be a little bit of time for Q&A. And then we'll move into our guest presenters who are here in Davis with us to talk about how to plan and deliver an effective training. So we'll start with Pete. Thank you so much, Pete, for joining us. It is all yours.
All right. Hey, everybody. One question. So I can't remember, is Mark Bell involved this year and going to be providing the...
So Mark is actually not an instructor this year.
Okay.
So we filled his vacant slots with other instructors.
Okay. I'm sure it'll be great. But I was kind of looking over what he presented last year because this is what Mark was covering, and he did an awesome job. So I'm assuming you guys pretty similar content material. But just before I get started, so I didn't prepare a presentation, a PowerPoint for you guys to look at. And that's kind of the one big no-no. You need something to visually interest people while you're doing these trainings. So hopefully from here on out, what I'll be sharing with you will actually be good practices to follow. But anyways, so just a little background again, or a refresher. So last year I went to Kenya and worked with KEFIS, which is basically the Kenyan equivalent to APHIS. And the goal of my project was to train farmers that were growing potatoes and tomatoes about 2 invasive pests in Kenya. Tuta absoluta, which is a leaf miner pest of tomatoes, and then potato cyst nematode, which is a nematode pest of potatoes. And so basically just raising awareness for these growers of the 2 pests in Kenya, and informing them about the ecology and potential strategies that they could use to manage both pests. And so to do that, really the goal was to develop a bunch of training materials, and that was also the kind of training interaction or program that we had. And so what I did was worked on, in addition to developing, brochures, we had some pest cards or kind of informational sheets. We had 4 training programs in Kenya, 2 focused on tomato growers, 2 focused on potato growers, where we kind of presented that same information, or the information that was in those brochures, in a kind of a, more personal interaction. So what I found was really important, and from the get-go, was just making sure that you were communicating with your organization right away to clarify the objectives. One thing that was made aware pretty quickly is that since the organization KEFIS had submitted the proposal, their objectives had changed a little bit, not significantly, but enough that it was pretty good that we're able to kind of make sure that we were on the same page for the objectives. And then from that point, we're able to start developing the actual training programs and materials, coming up with a plan. And basically what we did was we had face-to-face meetings with groups of farmers. I think we probably had about 40 to 50 farmers at each training session. And the logistics for organizing that was really largely on the organizations. And in Kenya, they were able to put together a couple dates and times that ended up getting moved around once I actually reached Kenya, because the weather was not cooperating. It was the start of the rainy season, so farmers were kind of busy at that point. So we had to be a little bit flexible about that, but it worked out in the end. And they were also heavily involved with communicating with the local agencies there, so making sure that word got out to the growers, making sure that people were aware that this training was going on, and we actually had decent attendance. But throughout that, I tried to make sure I was staying in contact and kind of staying on top of that, just to know what I might be able to expect once I got down there, or what hopefully would work out. And for the actual grower meetings, I was told at first that they weren't sure if we'd be able to use PowerPoint presentations. So I was kind of developing, in addition to PowerPoints at the same time, some sort of poster that I'd be able to bring down just in case that wasn't going to work out. But right before the end, they assured me that it wouldn't be a problem. So thankfully, we had a projector and a computer, and that was no issue at all. So one of the things that I think is pretty important, and I learned a little bit later on while developing these materials, was that when I started working on materials, I was not floundering, but wasn't really sure the progress I was making. And I actually, in one of my meetings with the organization, KIFAS, they provided me probably like a month in with materials that they had already developed for pretty similar approaches. So I was excited to receive those materials, not frustrated, but mostly excited, because that gave me kind of a benchmark to where to go from there. So one thing I would really encourage, if you're developing some sort of training program like this, is to see what materials that your organization does have if they don't provide them right away, because that can give you a pretty good sense of, in addition to your communication, what kind of information they're looking for, their approach to presenting it. Again, like most good presentations, it was really heavy on visuals, and just what information they have available to you. And that can save you a lot of time, because you're not starting from scratch, reinventing the wheel. And so my approach was basically try to update it best I could with information that I was developing, or kind of putting together as the project was going on. So that was pretty important. And, really just try to keep it simple. One thing that Mark really stressed, so last year that was really stressed, is to make an effective training program, you've got to establish trust with your farmers somehow. And, Mark was discussing being open, sincere, making sure you've got respect for each other, and developing some sort of, rapport with them. So in order to try to do that, the first thing, as soon as we got to the location where we were having these training sessions, was that I was trying to, it wasn't possible to greet every farmer that was coming in, but try to start to put a face to a name best I could as they were approaching. So they felt like I wasn't just hanging out on the side of the room waiting for this presentation to get over with it. I was genuinely interested in these people. Wasn't always easy because there was a lot of people, but tried the best I could. And then mingled with them prior to the start of the conversation, because people probably hung out for a couple hours. And then what I thought was kind of useful, another thing you want to do to kind of develop or establish that trust, is demonstrate that you've got some credibility or some competency in the material that you're presenting. So I didn't spend a lot of time, but spent a decent amount of time giving them some background information on my own research as an entomology graduate student, and kind of showing them what I had been doing to demonstrate, I've got some idea of how this system kind of works. And then throughout the training program, and I learned this partially from Trellis, but also just from being involved in extension activity here at NC State. You really want to make sure that you're keeping your audience engaged best you can. And so visuals really awesome, not just on a screen, but actually physical objects. So prior to each training program, we would typically visit 1 or 2 farms and collect infested plant materials, so the tubers of potatoes, the roots of potatoes, or the actual tomato fruits, show them symptoms of what infested plant materials looked like, and also had some traps for the Tuta absoluta as well. So I think that really helped them. Just to break up the meeting, we'd break out in groups and kind of check out the plant materials that were infested. And as I was going along, as much as I could, I would try to ask questions or get a show of hands just to facilitate that interaction. So wasn't just like a talking head talking at the people. And then at the end, we were trying to facilitate a discussion with the group, but people were a little bit hesitant to become too involved with that. So After that, we also kind of had a little, if people wanted to come up and talk with me, I had some questions that were part of the evaluation for my M&E program. And I got several volunteers for that. So just trying to get people involved as well as I could with that. I'm trying to think, I got some notes here. Yeah, so, and, I'm sure you're going to be going over it again, the material, but, consider who your audience is when you're developing this training program. I think the acronym is Ask Me. I can't remember off the top of my head what that stands for, but it worked out really well. And one thing that I constantly referred to when I was developing these programs was the Ag Extension Online website that was provided. I think there was a link to that last year, and they've got a lot of really good materials online for developing similar programs and kind of setting up your the way that you want to approach the development of this material. So all of that said, I think those resources were pretty well presented and were incredibly useful last year in developing that material. So, and luckily, we didn't really have any issues with actually carrying out the training programs. Most people showed up on time. We didn't have any issues securing our locations, had PowerPoints and whatnot. So we had some backup stuff prepared. They had posters that they provided, which is probably not a bad idea, just in case you're unable to get a working projector or something like that. But luckily, everything went really smoothly, and I had 4 really good groups that I interacted with, no disruptions or anything like that. Everybody was really seemed really appreciative of it. So I had a really good experience, I thought, and I hope you all do as well. So I guess if anybody has any questions or if there's anything else they'd like me to kind of expand upon, I'd be happy to do that.
Thanks. We have a couple minutes if people want to ask questions, and I'll also send out the materials from Mark Bell's presentation last year as a supplemental reference for delivering trainings.
Okay.
Any questions, people feel free. We have one question in this room.
Sure.
Hello. Hello.
Hey.
So I was wondering, how did you manage with both languages, or was there more than, like, so you were explaining everything in English and there was a translator there with you, or?
So the 2 of the agents that I was with both translated, but surprisingly, there was, out of, I don't know, probably 250 farmers I interacted with, only 1 did not speak English. And I was like really surprised at that. But yeah, we had people translating at the same time too, for that farmer, but the rest of the time it really wasn't an issue. So I lucked out that not lucked out, but that was fortunate that that language barrier wasn't that great. There were a couple times that we had to clarify things and it was easier in Swahili, but it worked out pretty well. So
I think that might be a special case for Kenya. Maybe there are more English language speakers. I don't know if everyone's going to get so linguistically lucky.
If you are working in a country where you don't have, many English language speakers, then you need to do training with trainers. You need to work with 4 set of people that you will train in English, and then they will translate the material and do like one script. So that's normally how you can get around it. Yeah, with regular translation right then and there, it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Thanks. Do we have other questions?
Just so you know, it's kind of hard to hear when somebody's talking in the actual physical room, but their mic is off. So I couldn't hear what Rashmi was saying.
Oh, sorry, Russell.
That's
I will
okay.
make sure the computer's closer to people. Rashmi was saying that in that scenario, you'd want to focus your strategy on training the trainer using that model. So then you as the Trellis fellow would train English speakers in country who can then directly implement trainings for the farmers who would need it in the local language.
Okay, I understand. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one. So he, like, while talking, he said something about sharing the material with the host organization as we prepare them. So can you ask him like what he said? That wasn't clear to me. Like, should we share like in parts like what we have prepared so far, or like what did he say? Like, can you ask him to clarify?
Sure. I think I heard the question. So maybe I didn't make it clear. So I started working on these presentations like pretty early on. And at some point, because I think I met fairly regularly and emailed a lot with CAFUS. And at some point, they shared a lot of materials that were very similar to what I was supposed to be preparing, like the training PowerPoints, brochures, and yeah, the PowerPoints and brochures. There's some overlap. So I found it really useful, and I would recommend if you are developing this kind of training program, see what your organization does have, and then after that, it was probably a bi-weekly basis or a weekly basis, especially closer to the end. I was sharing with them what I had developed, trying to get some feedback, and it wasn't always instantaneous. We had to do some. Make some changes to my programs once I got on the ground in Kenya, but that wasn't that difficult to do because we had been making sure that we were in pretty close communication. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, definitely ask and see what materials they have available, if any, because that's a good starting point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. I think if people have additional questions, can they email you?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, that would be awesome. Just for the sake of time, we may have to transition to the next part of the seminar, but thank you so much for zooming in and sharing your perspective. I think it's really useful to hear an alumni student's experience.
Sure. Right.
Okay, take care. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Rashmi and Gill, who are gonna share their screen.
It's working?
You just have to share your screen on Zoom.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm only shared on.
Perfect. Great. Okay, so Rashmi and Gill are up.
Unmute. There. Okay.
So hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Gurbinder Gill, and I have Rashmi with me. And it's a pleasure talking to you all today. And as the title says over here, we will talk about planning and delivering an effective workshop. The idea is that why we are in the room, we are already doing a project for Horticulture Innovation Lab in Rwanda and Burkina Faso. And the outline of the projects we read through some of the projects, what you are trying to do in a short time, though we have a longer version. Rwanda is a 3-year project, and Burkina Faso is a 2-year project. And in Rwanda, we are working on tomatoes, chilies, bananas, and the plantain bananas, and orange flesh sweet potato. While in Burkina Faso, it is only about tomatoes. So before we jump into the details, as Pete said, on the structure, how one can plan it out, I would just like to give you a flavor of what we are trying to do in these projects, and then you can relate that what are the similarities or a portion of it. So Rwanda project, and that's what we would also like to highlight to you, that it is for you, it's primarily a research problem, a research statement at this point of time. But we would encourage, as we did in our project. So Rwanda program was basically to reduce post-harvest losses of the key crops. And then the structure comes, the program design, you have to identify what crops. So typically in any country, some of you had already picked up almost, what crops you're working on. Am I right? Everyone knows that. So here in Rwanda, we divided the study on, now when you say reducing post-harvest loss, we divided into 3 components. The first component is actually measuring the losses. And there is a methodology which is available online also on Horticulture Innovation Lab. It's called Commodity System Assessment Methodology, CSAM. Have you anybody seen it? Or Rashmi, we can send a link to the team. So it's a methodology where you actually break up right from the harvest point of time and understand the process that, okay, at what stage, what happened. It is common to say in developing world, you lose 40% of the tomatoes or you lose 50% of the produce. The very important thing is to understand that where it is happening. Is it happening on farm? Is it happening after the harvest on the farm? Or it is happening transit or at the wholesale end or retail end? And when you break up that information, and it may not be a component of your research, but I would still encourage, you may not need to do the whole CSAM, but look at that concept and understand breaking the losses. And from there onward, the most important thing is when you are going to work on reduction of post-harvest losses from 40% or 50%, you can't make it zero. Now the second phase, what we call is a value chain analysis. Understanding the actors in the game, that why and how this loss is happening across the value chain. And that will give you a point of reflection, which will tell you, okay, I can reduce 10% here with the most effective way, where is a positive actor there. Simple example, a wholesaler in the market is more keen on less segregation because he's going to make money by segregating and giving it to the other people on the end. So you have to find out who's a willing partner and whom to train. So that will come out of your value chain analysis, and it's a very simple approach. We can share some slides also on the process. You need not to go and master it, but I'm just highlighting it is important to look at those things. The third piece which we added on to the project is what we call as life cycle assessment. What I would say is like an environmental footprint. When a farmer is losing 50% of or 40% of a produce, it's not only the economic loss, because in developing world, nothing gets waste. Even a squished tomato will be bought by somebody. End of the day, what happens is you are getting a reduced value of your produce. So there is nothing like throwing happens in that part of the world. Other than in most of the countries, I see the list you people are going to work. Normally it never gets thrown, so only you get a reduced value. So there are 2 components. One is that what you are seeing as a reduction on the price. If I'm a farmer harvesting 100 kgs of tomatoes, I'm getting worth of 60 kgs. So that's a loss, one loss. The second loss is, as a farmer, I'm tilling the land for 100 kilos. I'm putting the seed for 100 kilos. I'm putting water, fertilizer, chemicals, everything for 100 kgs, and transport it and get value for 60. So there is another cost which you need to look at that point of time. But more important than that is, in these countries, there is the 2 major stresses: water and capital. And just imagine if you are using 40% of more water, you are using 40% of more fertilizer. Not only it's a waste of resources, but it has a larger carbon footprint. And when you say the carbon footprint, normally it comes to the mind the waste, while we think it is transporting. But believe me, technically it's the fertilizer which is the biggest chemical, which is the biggest culprit. Because to produce a chemical fertilizer, you are creating another carbon footprint level, then using it and getting into the soil. So idea is to match all these 3 things together. Now coming to the how to design and structure, I will highlight, that's what I think Pete also earlier highlighted. It is very important to know how and what country that country offers you. Rwanda, we have good local partners, and we then hire the local people. We train them to do the commodity system assessment, We train them to do value chain analysis and the life cycle assessment. And we are able to use them as a resources going forward. So we have a full-time coordinator, a local Rwanda person working for us over there. While in Burkina Faso, like you will face in many countries, and what Pete also highlighted, and I remembering going back to my college days, when you go to a third organization, yes, it is your project. For them, it may not be in that important list of the activities for them. And that is where I think Pete highlighted, it is very important to get face straight into it and agree on some things. Don't leave it kind of, okay, I've been there, I'll be trying to discuss. I think it is important to get that alignment up in the front because your time is limited on such kind of assignments. So coming on the approach, so in Rwanda, in Burkina Faso, the problem is different. In Rwanda, it is the food crop. In Burkina Faso, it's a very small country next to Ghana. The challenge is why we got this horticulture innovation decided on this project, that they worked, the primary requirement is the nutrition, getting a good food or a good nutrition into the farmer's family. And they started 2 big projects over there, which was toward developing their malnutrition and other things. And they found that wherever the water is there, you can help them grow some vegetables, or in their home gardens, they can do some tomatoes. And after 3-4 years of hard work, now you have the tomatoes, but then you don't have the right marketing channel. And so it becomes a question of surplus. And then when it is surplus, and then the traders try to exploit. So we have to look into, and they will continue to do that. And what the post-harvest solutions, whether our projects or your interventions are going to do, and when we are working with the smallholder farmers, the challenge here, we are not talking about storing tomatoes or storing any produce for more than 1 month, or here I think the focus should be that how you can increase the farmer negotiation capacity. Because today what is happening, he has a full mature ripe tomato farm, and the trader comes, and farmer also knows that if he doesn't come for next 2 days, or he doesn't buy it, sell it today, he's going to lose a major chunk of his crop. So in my mind, for smallholder farmers, the focus needs to be how he can first reduce the losses on farm by himself. 2, how he can have that extra day or 2 by simple technologies which he can practice, and Rashmi can highlight some of them later. So from there, so in Burkina Faso, we started working with the training of the trainers. So we are not doing the extension work ourselves like we are doing in Rwanda. Even in Rwanda, we are doing it through partners, but we are leading it. But in Burkina Faso, even today, just I got a message. So first, and very important on these training programs, to me, it's not just a one delivery. If you have luxury of time when you are working on your project, try to do a kind of a first set of training and then do a refresher. Because a lot of time when you have trained or guided somebody to do a certain process, and that person is going to do it actually on the field, there will be some questions. So if you are not able to go back, I think design in a way that your local resource at least follows it up with them. We found it very effective because if you are training 20 people or workshop of 50 people, your retention level is not what you expect. So I actually divide it into, in our projects, we call it threefold: train, refresh, review, and reward. So I know you can't create a reward for them at this point of time, but their reward can be defined in a way that, okay, if you work in this way, you will have extra dollars in front of you. And that's what very important to understand, the cost benefit you are trying to create on the table for those trainees. You don't need to be an economist. You don't need to have to do a very detailed accounting analysis. But if you tell somebody that he or she is going to quantify that number. And it's a cost benefit. Rashmi will explain a little bit while walking you through. So by brief, before Rashmi gets onto it, is you need to be very clear that who's your audience, and trust, which Pete has earlier called out, and we will continue to call it out. It's very important. And secondly, believe me, even now after we are trained and working in different countries, and you guys are going out in the field, a typical farmer mindset is, I know farming for last 100 years. My grandfather has done it, my father has done it, and here is a university graduate trying to tell me to change the practices. From America. Right?
Yeah.
So keep that sensitivity in mind. You are not, we are there, all of us, while we go, that here I am, I have understood your problem. So convey that, and you can only do it after you have evaluated that. So you say, I had come to your country, I worked with your local university, I had understood this problem, and then try to say it in front of them that, have I captured it right? And once you get that kind of a buy-in, then those audience get, okay, here is somebody who has done some work, and then he has or she has a better solution based on the university she or he is working in US, can do something good for me. So build that connection at the beginning. Institution you are going to partner with, see something what you can highlight in the very beginning of your communication, that say, okay, we are collaborating with Horticulture Innovation Lab. They have already, I would simply say recently, they have just come out with a nice guidebook to build a solar chimney dryer, or they have some to set up a cool bot. So that institution also should be able to get,
I think the people on Zoom can see, but not over
Okay,
here. You can
fine.
keep talking. I'll try to fix it.
So the point, what we are trying to say is that there are a lot of resources available with you at the university level. It may not be that much available to those institutions in those countries. Some of the places, they won't even have an internet access. So try to make something on a pen drive or a CD, which you can leave physically with them. Even simple thing, try to print it out from here. I know it is carrying paper all the way from US, but I worked with some of the universities over there. Even the lead project heads, they won't have a colored printer in their office. And to get access to a colored printer, they have to write an application. So make those simple things, logistics things useful. And I'll give it to Rashmi. She will walk you through some of the things. What I would say, try to understand the process, why we are saying this, and feel free. I think I have got into a monologue, but going forward, just if you don't understand anything, just stop Rashmi or me into the process. Ask the question, why, how, because saying that this can be done this way, ask that how. Rashmi, tell me how. So I would leave it to Rashmi. Thank you, everyone.
So that was a bit of background about the projects we're doing. And the reason that we're sharing about our project is because we will use that to contextualize some of the different components of a good workshop. So all of this background is really necessary for you to put together a good training. Yeah. So this is the part that I'm going to cover today. So first we'll go into the principles of adult learning, and we've touched on that a little bit about respecting and building trust. The initial planning that you need to do, and then a very deep dive into very design thinking. This is below, getting under the workshop. What is the main purpose of the workshop, and how are you going to design it so that your learning objectives come through? And then we will actually try to flesh out a workshop outline for the day. So just really quick, if I can have 3 or 4 people share their workshop topic with the group, so we can keep that in mind as we as we keep going, and we can draw examples from the group. So if you can just state the name of the country where you will be teaching and what you will be teaching, and how long do you think this workshop is going to be? Any volunteers?
So I'm going to be going to Uganda, and my workshops, there's several trainings that I'm expected to be doing, and they primarily involve with post-harvest. So how to develop the packing house so it's in a good organization, how to do the solar chimney dryer, the ZEP, the CoolBot, and sort of general leadership skills and financial independence, and to make sure that the women who are benefiting from this product are actually getting the money and the leadership skills involved.
Sounds really good. Anyone else?
I'll jump in. Yeah, I'm doing soil health trainings in Nepal, and so that'll include some field type training. So I've got soil testing materials and infiltration materials and different things to train about soil health. And I'm really trying to emphasize a field component, so working with different demonstrations of soil health in the field.
Anyone on the Zoom? You can go ahead.
Sorry. So I'm going to Uganda. We're going to be training women, and I believe it's going to be training the trainers. It seems to be that we're going to have like 10 training workshops, I think like twice a day. We're also going to have a demonstration plot, and so for propagating trees, and then we're going to be making fertilizers and pesticides. Yeah, I don't know about the pesticide, but that's what they said.
Neem leaves. Okay, so these are principles of adult learning. It's just something to always keep in mind, because we are all teaching adults, and that's a little bit different than how classroom teaching in universities or schools happen. So I'll run through this quickly. So adults are directing, which basically means that they are in control of their lives. So when you try to teach them something, they need to kind of be on board with that. They need to know the benefits, the values, and the purpose of the training. Typically, when we start a training, suppose on post-harvest losses, on the first day, in the first half of the training, we will first present on what we're learning about post-harvest losses in tomatoes, and then we will break them out into small groups and ask them to actually draw out the whole value chain map, and for them to figure out themselves where they think the losses are. This gets them deeply thinking about the losses and how much there is in the chain. And without that kind of deep thinking, they might not get the purpose or the main objective of reducing losses. Okay, the second is adults learn by doing. So all the training must have a very active and practical component where they get to practice. They say if you I think, I don't remember the percentages very well right now, but if you tell somebody something, they might just get like 20% of what you're telling them, but if they do it, it's closer to 100%. Relevance. You need to contextualize it into their current work, into their current challenges, and make it meaningful to their lives and their business or the working of that NGO or the cooperative. If they don't see this as applying to them, then they will not be interested. Experience. So adult learners draw from their own past experience. They need to be able to make linkages and connections to what you're saying. Okay, so this is really about grounding your training and using your learner's language so that they can make those easy connections. They need to use all of their senses. So if you can make your training as multi-sensory as possible, PowerPoints are great. Do flip charts, do group exercises, get people moving. audio, visual, and we've talked a little bit about how sometimes PowerPoint doesn't work. I'll sometimes like print out the whole PowerPoint as handouts, so that if the screen doesn't work, then they can have it in front of them anyway. But if you're good at flip charting, and that's also a really great way to have someone be the note taker. So as the workshop moves, you can have sort of a documentation of what happened that day. Practice is really important because, again, people learn by doing and doing repeatedly, and that kind of goes to what Gil was saying about the refresher trainings. As much as people can practice during the training and then after the training, and also have some sort of troubleshooting available, so when they do hit places where they don't know how to move forward, they can know that they have a problem in this area, and that you only know that through practice. And I remember when I was in high school, my math tutor would always start the session with saying, "Do you have any questions? Do you have any doubts?" And I'd be like, "No, I don't have any doubts." And they'd be like, "Oh, you didn't practice. If you haven't practiced, of course you're not going to have any questions." Yeah, so that's part of it. Then personal development. So this kind of goes to the person's intrinsic and personal desires and their own growth objectives. So they need to be able to see that what you're teaching them fits into their larger scheme of life. That's something that can become a part of their life, and that can help them grow themselves and their families. And that if they're not motivated at a very deep level, and this deep level motivations really come around family and happiness and getting out of poverty. If you don't hit that chord in a person, then likely their curiosity is going to be muted. And then the last one I have is involvement. Adults like to be very involved. So you have to create many spaces for them to give you feedback, before the training, during the training, after the training, so that they feel like there's ownership and they're also taking the training and evolving the training as you go around. Sometimes you kind of have to do on the spot, create something because they might not know a basic fundamental around that. For example, once I went into doing a finance training, and I realized that people didn't understand the basic concepts of accounting. So I had to put together a quick accounting lesson before we could get into the finance. So that goes to involvement. How do we make sure that people can see? Okay, there you go. These are a few things you need to know at the very beginning. These are, the different why, who, what, how, when, where, okay? This is like when you start orienting yourself to the training, what is the main reason for the training? Who are these learners? Are they men? Are they women? What are their ages? What is the profession? Am I meeting with farmers? Am I meeting with government officials, extension workers? What are their motivations? What will the training do for them? How? So what learning tools are you going to use? So some of you already have this, right? I'm going to make a plot demo. I'm going to train them on making jam, or so you have to know that. And then when will the workshop be held? How much time do you have? So you can prep around that. Where is the venue? Does it actually suit the learning objectives? Do you need a classroom setting? Do you need a U table, round tables, all of that? So this is the beginning. You need to have these questions very clear. So this is also a good way to design a concept note for your workshop. If you haven't designed your concept note for your workshop, that's something I recommend doing, because once you have that, and it doesn't have to be, this is like a page and a half max, right? This also helps you design the sort of invite for the workshop, or whoever else needs to sign off on this workshop can use this template to say, hey, this workshop is on. So it can be used to align the different stakeholders as well. So we always have people do a little concept note for the workshop. And the one thing that we usually add to this is also budget. So if you're going to have a workshop, you need to have the budget down.
What's a concept note?
A concept note is essentially a short document that lays out the main things behind the workshop. So these would be like answering these questions would get you to the important things you need to know about the workshop, And so when we have workshops, because we work, some of the organizations we work with are large and bureaucratic. And so they like to know everything, know all of this stuff, have their bosses sign off on it, and then use this information to put out invites. And then sometimes we'll also have like a little application form, because once you do this, you'll know what the criteria is for the participants, right? So then they can send it out to a larger group of participants and have them apply to be part of the workshop. And then you can wean down on who gets to actually attend the workshop. So there are different ways in which you can use this like a concept note. The next thing I have is this workshop planning canvas. This gets to really understanding your participants and where do you want to go with them. So, last year's presentation did a really good job on, the different components of the workshop. And I know that Lauren is going to share that with you guys. So since that had already been done, I wanted to go like one step deeper onto the basic, the core of this workshop and what you want to achieve with it. Not just how to do a workshop, but the whys, all the different whys behind the workshop. This is also really helpful because you're going into an environment, it's a new environment where you don't quite understand the people and their motivations. And it's important to really get it, for yourself and to get it with the organization so that you're not totally tone deaf and off base in different areas. So this, the source is there, and you can log in and do this online as well, or you can, print it off and do it. So as we go through this little canvas exercise, I want you to keep your workshop in mind. And as a first step, just mentally start filling this out as to what you know. And then when you're ready, you can have other stakeholders, other organizers from your NGO and share this with them and see what they come up with. And that's a great place where you'll be able to check your assumptions versus what, how the NGO views the purpose, because sometimes, what you may think might be very different from what the NGO thinks. So this will really help you go to a deeper level. And as I work through this canvas with you, I will share as a case study use our Rwanda tomatoes post-harvest losses, where we often do trainings for ag extension workers. So let's go through this canvas. So the first thing is entering behavior, right? So when folks come into your workshop, think about what are their current behaviors? What do they know? What do they say about this certain topic, right? So when I'll just tell you about the case. Most of the ag extension workers who come through for us have not worked in horticulture. In fact, in general, most people in the world have not worked in horticulture. Most agronomists know grains more, right? So they may be entirely new to horticulture. They might not understand post-harvest. That's also people have been traditionally focused on the production side, right? So one of the things is they don't really know much about post-harvest. They may know that there are losses, but not quite understand the level of losses. So this is where I try to profile the entering behavior.
So the one very important factor while talking about the post-harvest losses, people confuse not 10%, 50, more than 50%. To them, post-harvest is more about processing. When you talk post-harvest, immediately they think, okay, from tomatoes to make ketchup or puree or something. But I think the focus of most of you, yes, that is also a very important piece of post-harvest management. But you have to highlight when you are saying post-harvest, what do I mean? And second most important at entering behavior, why you need to understand what Rashmi has highlighted. If it is just the extension agents, for them in developing world, there are 20 other workshops to go. And most of the places, let me be very clear with them, if your organization has created some kind of a attendance per diem, they are more attracted for it. If it is not, then you have to define the objective. So very important, understand that these extension workers or this set of farmers, what has been the previous exposure for them. Talk to your local partner. And the top more important thing is what in business management, we talk about customer experience. What I mean by that is most of the places, if you go to an agriculture university, they would have their set number of farmers or set number of extension people who are responsive to them. So every time if there is a new PI or a project guy, he or she will be guided, okay, go to this person in that city, go to that person in that city. So normally these people are being asked by many other people. So understand what is their audience, how many times they have come to such training, how my training is going to be a little different or better than what they have been to. So think about those at the beginning, then rather than jumping into it. So that's a small.
Yeah. Then the next, once you understand the entering behavior, you also have to understand what you want their exiting behavior to be, right? So what do I really want them to know after they have gone through my workshop, right? So for us, it is, we want them to understand that tomatoes are important. Tomatoes are a good source of earning money for farmers, for increasing the food security of the country, and it can be done by following these, post-harvest tools and technologies, right? So that can be a good example of what kind of exiting behavior we're looking for. And you also want them to feel empowered. Their exiting behavior should be, I have the power to, have better soil, right? Or I have the power to, sorry, what was your example?
The pest control?
Yeah, I have the power to reduce pests in these crops. So that really needs to be their exiting behavior. Use the 5 whys, the 5 whys are when you keep asking why over and over. So why do I care about tomatoes? Because it can make, what is the problem with post-harvest losses in tomatoes? So, and why is that a problem? So you say it's a problem because there are many tomato farmers and they have 50% losses. So then the next why is like, oh, why is there 50% losses? Well, because they have never been trained in reducing losses. And so why have they never been trained in reducing losses? Because nobody's worked on reducing losses in tomatoes in Rwanda. So you keep saying why a few times so you understand what the background is for that, group of people. Now, that'll also help you understand what their exiting behavior needs to be. Then we look at their pains, what are their frustrations. So for us, it's that, our extension officers might not know about tomatoes, they're not trained in it, has not been working it, and does not feel like they know how to reduce losses for their farmers, right? So that's their pain. So figure out whatever you're working on, what is their fear, frustration, pain with that problem.
And ask them to ask during the workshop, design in a way that this get called out at the very beginning.
Yes.
Because then they because you would have understand some pain areas, but you might have missed some of them. So when you're starting in the design, and Rashmi will later on share with you, it's very important to in the room that everyone thinks that we are on the same page.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. So you also need to understand what value they're going to get out of the workshop, and what are they really committing, what are they sacrificing to be here, and that kind of builds empathy for their situation, right? So they may be taking time out from their job. They may have traveled a long distance to get there. They may have left their children unattended at home. They may have to spend the night away from their family. So you have to keep all of these things in mind as you go into the workshop. So you're really understanding and taking care of the needs of those people who are in your class. And then as Gil was saying, and this goes to the next one a little bit about return, what are they looking for in return? So of course they're looking forward to learning things, and they want to know some concrete things that they can use and very quickly implement, right? So that being able to very quickly use what they have learned also sort of emphasizes the learning, because they're able to practice it right away. So leave them with demos or lesson plans, things that they can use quickly, I guess. So gains. This is about, what do they want, need, or dream about? What benefits are they seeking? So look at the larger benefits that they may be seeking. So, people want to earn more money. If, some may feel entrepreneurial and may be looking to invest in something. Some may be looking at what you're teaching and seeing if they can charge a fee for that service, or maybe they're thinking of moving from their government job to the NGO job, which may pay more. So there, people just try to understand what their larger framework is in terms of what did they want to gain. Sometimes it's per diem. So for us in Rwanda, we did not know that people expect an allowance to attend a training, and we had not planned for it. And then when we got there and started working, we realized that nobody is going to come or sit through your whole workshop if you did not give them accommodation and travel allowance.
And then learning from that in Burkina Faso, when we understood this is a challenge in those parts of the world. In Burkina Faso, what we said, okay, there is a 3-day, 2.5-day training program, and we will share, I think we can share the previous training program with all of you.
Yeah.
So what we created is, we said, here is a 2.5-day program, and then there is an online training certification you can get to do through a particular link. And people who goes through that process, they will get a certificate at end of the day. And what it helps in their mind is, and only today I just got a message from my team member over there. After the first 3.5-day training, we had 40 people coming back for the refresher. For 2 reasons. One, they want to understand more. Second, in their mind, what we have created, that you can get certified as a post-harvest specialist after completing this course online, and which will help most of these NGOs, extension officers, in their next jobs. So you have to think that why these people are coming to my room. If have they been just asked by an agriculture university, or they have been asked by the NGO. So we have to understand and create some kind of incentivization. Incentivization is not always money. As Rashmi said, after the training, if you can articulate, if you do this, if it is let us say a group of farmers, And if you improve the soil health, you will get 10% more. And what are you growing? I'm growing corn or I'm growing vegetable. What does that 10% more means? How many dollars on the table? Because all these are half an acre or even some of them are less than that kind of a farmer. Any additional dollar on the table is something important. Otherwise, for him, if I talk about an environmental footprint to a farmer and say that you by reducing the post-harvest, you are going to earn the carbon credits for the country, it doesn't mean anything to him. It means to the policymakers, but for him, it is that how you can doing this. If you are putting a shade after harvesting the tomatoes, you are putting a shade, you are storing it under the shade, you will save 10% because then you have to run an experiment. Keep tomatoes in open, keep okra or whatever vegetable in open. You have to run some of those things in ahead of the time and then capture it and make those farmers come and say that, okay, I left my produce in the sun by the evening because most of the time this produce is collected in the evening. There will be a group trucker who will come and aggregator who will go. So simple example, we had an exporter who's doing chilies for export in Rwanda. And when, as Rashmi said, the pain areas and the gain areas, when we talked to the farmer said, oh, every time I ship my chilies to this guy, they steal 10-15% out of it. So when we started discussing this, why, and the question comes, why would a importer would steal chilies? Because he needs those farmers, but it's a farmer wording, not one farmer, two farmer, three farmers, many farmers. Now, when we digged deep into that, what we found is that exporter ships on Friday, and he asked the chili growing farmers to start harvesting from Monday onward because chili harvesting is difficult, and he needs a large quantity. So farmers are harvesting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then he sends his truck on a Thursday, and then even the Monday produce get loaded or the Thursday produce get loaded. When we conducted a simple experiment, kept the chilies for 24 hours, open and non-ambient because no farmer will have an air conditioner or air cool, it loses 12% weight because vegetables are water. So now that answers the question, because when then it tells us that why farmer, because if somebody has harvest on Monday, is shipping on Thursday, there's already loss of weight happened already for him, but he attributes it to the exporter. I'm not saying exporters don't cheat, they do, but we have to little bit dig into their pain area. That's where what earlier Rashmi said, understand their language, how they are articulating your problem. You have a scientific problem, they have a on-ground problem. So the quickly we marry both and then starts on the why will be helpful. Rashmi, go ahead, sorry.
The next one I have is what are the expectations? So even before they come to the workshop, they will have some expectations about how it's going to be, and these expectations are largely set on their previous experience with that NGO or with other workshops that they have attended. So your challenge then is, if they've had any previous negative experiences, to very quickly establish a positive frame of mind for your participants. And so this is similar to what Pete was saying about establishing trust right away. So make sure that based on what you're hearing, and you may learn more from your NGO partner, to set up the room in a certain way. Have names out, have sign-up sheet, use humor, use icebreakers, so that if they're coming in with any negativity, you can quickly get them past that.
After every 2 hours, there need to be a simple icebreaker in the room. And when I say icebreaker, just YouTube and Google it. Icebreakers for the conference, even it's jumping together or doing some silly exercise. It just get them from back to the real. Get out of the room means get out of the workshop. refresh them,
Yeah.
get them back.
You need to think about satisfaction and how they will be, assessing their experience and then telling other people about the workshop. So you need to be thinking about messaging throughout and what kind of messaging these people will go out of the world with. So some of the things that we do to sort of craft that and control that is first, one of the things you can do is do a needs assessment. So right at the beginning of the workshop, you can ask them to do a self-assessment about, what they know about this topic, and then do another assessment at the end. So, another second self-assessment to see how much they've learned. So this says like, oh, I did not know much about increasing soil health with composting at the beginning, but now I do know. Right? And that sort of active reflection increases their confidence, and then also increases their ability to kind of positively feel about the workshop, and they feel more satisfied about it. So that reflection is important. Evaluation is also very important. Make sure that you do a training evaluation, a workshop evaluation at the very end, and ask them to, state their aha moments, or, what did you really learn from this workshop? Because those reflections will help you as a trainer and also help them encapsulate it so that they walk away with that at the end of the day. Costs, make sure that you know the costs for the venue, the food, if there's any transportation, for all of the materials. This is handouts, exercises, paper, flip chart, all of that. If there's accommodation, you don't skip this step. It may be very important for your partner organization that you're working with.
Because on your trellis fund, you have a limited budget, and your partner may or may not have that extra thing.
Yeah, and you have to figure out what comes from your budget and what comes from their budget, because there might be a share. Yeah. The next one is revenue. This is really important to us because we call ourselves, our name is Agribusiness Associates. Farming is a business, okay? And if it's not a business, if it's subsistence, it needs to move towards being a business. So when you're doing that workshop, make sure that you understand what the financial revenue streams are of that workshop and resulting from that workshop for the NGO partner and for the learner. And for that, if you need to do, one of the ways we do it is we do cost benefit analysis, right? So this is that experiment where you do like tomatoes without shade and in shade. And then we say, hey, there was a 10% reduction in post-harvest loss. And then that 10% means 10 cents more per kilo, right? Whatever that math is, take it to that most logical end so that at the end of the day, what the farmer wants to do is have more money to feed his family or her family, right? So make that very clear to them. Don't just train them on the ZEC, okay? Teach them how that ZEC is going to increase their wealth. Recently, I live and work in Ethiopia as well. I did some farmer focus groups, and they told us, oh, we have been trained on how to plant in rows, but we don't bother, right? So somebody did that training, but these people don't bother because they don't understand the value. They don't get that, cropping this certain way, which is more energy intensive, will have this much more impact on their income. So not taking it to that step may mean that there might be no adoption or very low adoption of whatever you're teaching them to do. What jobs are you helping him get done? So, frame whatever your training is in their larger area of work. So they can, again, make it more relevant to them and also put a framework around what you're trying to do and how they can incorporate this new practice into their existing practice. That's very important. And I'm going to go a little bit fast because we have only 15 minutes left. What is the promise that you're trying to deliver, right? What are you promising them? So make sure you know that and you tie it to really very quantifiable increases in their well-being. Okay, and do some deep thinking around that. Okay, instructional design. This is actually the bulk of Mark Bell's presentation, so you can go over there. But what we do is try to understand, make a list of the concepts or topics that we want to teach, and then we figure out how best can these lessons be learned, right? So, for example, if I want somebody to understand losses in tomatoes, I will ask people to break into groups, 5 people groups, draw out the value chain, and figure out where in the value chain the losses are happening. People kind of can figure this out through group activity and peer activity, and then you can help, expand their learning a little bit more. You can use case studies, you can use role plays, all the kinds of different games. There's a lot of resources on the internet about, different situations and how you can.
So you talk about in post-harvest, people talk about maturity indices or different level of grading, sorting. Just bring 5 kilo of a vegetable, any produced local vegetable, put them in 3 groups and say, what can you do with this? Believe me, they are smarter than us. Within seconds, they will give you ripened tomatoes, half ripened tomatoes, or spinach, bad spinach, good spinach. And once they see that it's just doing, it becomes a kind of an activity. Or if it is a soil health, if you talk about compost or using agri-manure or pesticides, biopesticides, how to make it happen, you don't need to run a project as kind of a scale, but a small set of experience which they can use on the site.
Yeah. Another thing is, who do the learners need to get to know? So if whatever you're training them on needs them to go and buy something or needs another actor, for example, for us, we're going to do trainings on coolbots, how to design coolbots. The learners may need to know where to get the insulation material. So figure that out and invite those people to your workshop as sort of panel members, or have them give a short spiel. Just make sure that you are presenting a complete toolkit. So it's not just one part of the puzzle that the farmer needs to figure out. You're trying to give them as much resources around the problem that you're trying to solve. I think we're towards the very end. So the last one I have is experience journey, and this is what Gil was talking about, the customer journey. We talked about the review trainings we do, but also try to learn from the NGO if the participants have had previous contact. Do they have regular contact with the NGO, and how can you sort of keep reinforcing the learnings that you have shared, and what key messages need to get across and keep moving for the participants as they continue their life after the workshop, and how the NGO can keep on.
Very important thing when you are working with a third-party institution, your target is 10 workshops, and then you are gone. Start thinking what Pete said from the design perspective, that whatever material you create, there should be a small, short version of it, so that which you can leave with the parent organization in that country, that it becomes an integral part of their trainings, because they have a multiple agenda. They will be working on right from nutrition to some other things. But if you can think of that, how I leave a 15-30 minute, some kind of a small videos. These days, every one of us has good smartphones, and you don't need equipment for that. Shoot some videos that this is what was happening. This is what I have suggested based on your interaction, and this is the output. So that kind of a learning material will always stay back, because as we are sharing with you, make it interactive and make it audio visual, it will be a good tool for your partner institution, and they will be happy to use it as many times. And if you leave them with 50-page PowerPoint, nobody will present it again.
Yeah. For 1 hour or 2 hours, okay, but for anything between a half day to a 2-day workshop, you really need to do more of this kind of stuff. Okay, so I have a short exercise plan, but considering that we have only 10 minutes, let's just
start with questions.
Yeah, I was going to do a design a workshop outline together, but maybe you guys can do that on your own and reflect on all of these different components and see how you can bring it in.
And
So,
one thing which we can, and we are open to work with you, once you reflect on these, come out with your design outline.
yeah.
Lauren can share our emails with you. Feel free anytime that this is what I'm thinking. It may be the first cut thinking, it may be your final thinking. We don't mind. We'll be happy to guide and basically help, not guide even, I would put the word. I would say happy to work with you, because for us, you are the resources which are going out on the field, taking extra time to spend a leg out in those countries. I would be, for me, as Rashmi said, everything matters is business. Innovations has to be converted into a meaningful return. So from Horticulture Innovation Lab, this is a good initiative. And from Agribusiness Associates, we'll be happy anytime. Feel free to write an email to us. If we traveling, maybe a day. Otherwise, you can always expect a reply. So,
Okay, so I'll leave the sample design up on the board and start with taking questions. And any reflections?
Last G training program, I think.
Very hard to pull up.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's start with questions.
Questions, reflections, suggestions, everything.
So what is your experience working with translators and developing these training sessions? Because it definitely slows down the process significantly.
So right now, 3 days down the line, Serge is doing this meeting with our, so like in Rwanda, we have the material in English, and as somebody mentioned that most of the people understand, Pete mentioned that Rwanda also is a fairly good English speaking country. But we worked with our partners, and then you have to take at least a day out with your partners after you have developed your concept and thought. And then you sit, like our coordinator is spending a day and a half with our local partners, locking themselves in a small room or meeting for a day and a half, where it is getting translated, which has been already translated in Kenya, Rwanda. It has to be more pictorial, and even in pictorial, our people are going that level that you have to be sensitive to the local culture, religion. Showing a woman without a headgear or without a scarf in certain countries will not be appreciated. So you have to spend all those minor things and then make a material and then let the local partner own it. I call our role, people, your role. It is not that we are working for Horticulture Innovation Lab. We are not there to give things. We are co-creating the things with the local audience. And similarly, you are also co-creating an experience through your learning with the local partner. I would say the success of your project will be if you walk out and the local partner says, I developed this material. And I think everyone over here will understand that you had enabled him or her to develop that material. So use your thinking, put it into a concept, get a buy-in, and give. And that is another give. Like whosoever is attached from that organization with you, why should he spend extra 3 hours or 5 hours when he's not getting paid? Or if not getting so make him own that material. And that's where, to answer to your question, is you have to co-create, help them own it, and it comes by a pre-planning. You have to sit with them.
No, I was talking more like in the actual room when you're like trying, because most of the people, simultaneous translation. Because most of the people I work with are illiterate, so it doesn't matter what I write. It's all about what I say, what the translator then says.
So that is where we are saying, if you are attempting to do the translation, literal translation in the room at the last minute, you will not be able to say at least 80% of what you want. It never works. What will be important is, it is not you delivering the training if they are not understanding English. It is your local partner's person, and that person should be very much ingrained into your thought, and it has to happen before the training.
So would you recommend almost even writing a script out for them of things you intend to say, whether or not you go in that specific order, but like
what I want to get out of it?
Okay.
And that's because at least your co-partner on this project would be somebody who's speaking some English or better English than others. So you give him that what Rashmi has talked about. What message, end of the day, I want these people to get out of it. In the rooms, if it is farmers, the farmer needs to know, is it this all 1.5 day is going to add extra income from a small piece of land? And then your process start doing. If it is extension workers, then you have to talk about how you can empower your farmers to make extra dollar. So I would encourage, I'm not trying to make all of you businessmen, right? But link some dollars to whatever you're doing.
Yeah, so whoever your translators, they're not just a translator, they're a trainer. You need to work with them before, and then you can be with them there as they do the training, and help them along. Don't try to translate on the spot.
I think that's a good point, though, to bring up, and hopefully people on Zoom can hear me as well. But that I think it'll depend on the organization and the project, the level to which each Trellis student will be involved in the trainings. We've had students in the past who are expected to deliver the entire training, and it's really on them, and there will be simultaneous translation provided. And then in other cases, the student provides more of a support role for the local trainers. And so I think it's like a negotiation process with your organization.
So one of the biggest tenets of international development is capacity building and leaving that capacity with your local partner. So wherever possible, you should push to train people there so that they can move, really own it. And if they're not getting that and they really want you to do the training, even when there is a language barrier, you need to push and get them to accept that point. You don't want to go out there and do ineffective work that doesn't serve you or the partner organization. So
I think in terms of that, one of the things that I'm going to try and do is just be really organized in terms of like specific objectives and goals, so that if there is translation that needs to happen, or if I'm helping train people who will then be doing it in other languages, then we're clear on each individual component of it. So that's kind of my approach to doing that.
No, I think that is, so what you have heard Rashmi talked about, this is just a directional thought process. As much as ahead, as you rightly said, you start thinking about it, you will start solving the problems by yourself. And everyone works differently. Some people start thinking ahead, some just jump into the ground and try to solve it. There's nothing right and wrong, but we encourage, take some time out, think, and think doesn't you need to have a 1 day to yourself. Even 2 hours of thinking will bring you there. Defining that, who do I have to work with? If I get stuck with this, what do I do? And that will make it easy. Anything from the people on the net?
Yeah, I have a comment about that. when it came to figuring out exactly how it was going to be presented, they weren't very clear.
Is your volume up?
Maybe, hold on. Do you want to do your volume, Rashmi?
Oh, my volume is off. Hold on. Okay. Hi, we can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Regarding the translation stuff, at least for myself, I was having a hard time in the beginning understanding how it was going to be presented, if I was going to be translated, and if they wanted it prior so that they could just speak for me. And it just turned out I had to keep asking with more questions about the clarification. I said, okay, does it need to be translated? They gave me a simple yes. And I said, how? So am I going to be talking and you'll be translating? And they said, we'll be translating. And then I had to specifically ask, so I will speak and then you will translate after, a couple sentences, and then they'll say yes. And so sometimes it's just being annoying with questions.
No, that is where I would highlight, because this happens because you are a very small part of that organization's so many activities. For you, it is the big thing or the main thing because you have taken time out to do this, effort to do this. For them, it is one of the activities. So very important at the beginning to call out. And sometime, I know you work on a very shoestring budgets. It may not be difficult if you find another university student in that environment, a local guy, person, share a very small amount of money and a dinner. Things happen. I'm not saying use money for everything, but if you need to do it to make it more effective, do it. But literal translation, I can understand what Russell you said. And half of the time you don't know what other guy is telling them and what meaning it is. Not half of the time, most of the time you don't know.
Yeah. Any other questions, or I think we're pretty much out of time?
So Lauren, you can circulate our email and everything. And we'll be happy to work with you whenever you have. And I'm always happy to come back to the campus and feel young again. So write me anytime.
Sorry, can we email you with like a plan of what we're thinking,
Yes.
like a workshop, and then so we can like brainstorm? Okay.
Yeah, so we'll definitely share the presentation, the recording, your contact information. Rashmi, if possible, I'm not sure if you have example, like I made a note, like concept notes or like pre and post evaluations that you can share with students, and we can just maybe model it after an existing template.
Yeah, I didn't get to talk about evaluation, but it's in here. If you can just send me a list of the resources, because I didn't write that in that list as we were saying, hey, we're gonna send you this and that, so you can tell us what to send.
And
we'll
maybe,
make sure we do it.
Rashmi, what we can use is, I remember the last workshop in October in Burkina. So we had the concept paper written for that. We had the design for that. We had the evaluation form for that. And it's a public knowledge. We can share it with you. You just circulate. It's not like everyone should do like that. It's like a
best
just an
practice.
example.
I actually have one more question. So you mentioned trying to gauge participants' expectations and what their previous interactions were with organizations. So I'm wondering if we ask our organization about this, what's the likelihood that they'll be honest, like that they'll know that maybe participants have not had good interactions in the past, and therefore we have like a little bit of an obstacle to overcome. Like, do you think organizations, like it's appropriate to ask them how farmers perceive their interactions, like to try to gauge expectations ahead of time?
So basically, what Rashmi mentioned at that point of time, you need not to have, nobody will answer that, did your people have the bad time last workshop? And believe me, I have seen so many reports. I work both in commercial side and the development side. I haven't seen any development sector report where somebody has failed.
Right.
Right. While in my business side, you took up 5 different projects, you succeed in 2, make money from that, fail in 3. So hence nobody will tell you they have failed. But I think as what it is a participatory or any issue of co-creation, what I talked about, when you start with your partner from that organization from the beginning, try to be, okay, what happened, any challenges from your past experience, you know better than me, and then people open up.
Yeah.
And then you say anything I should need to be aware of.
Yeah.
It's a little participatory and digging process. We are not there to change their behavior. And the second thing on expectation, if you get to know the list of the participants ahead of the time, that will be always helpful for you. Because then you know that in the room of 30 people, 10 are farmers, 5 are women farmers. And if you can even design a small questionnaire, not a very detailed, nobody will fill that beforehand. But you need to know, okay, this is a farmer of 5 acre, half an acre land growing cassava, growing rice in Nepal or that. As much as you can get to know, the typical definition for an organizer is very difficult till the last day to tell you. But if you can ask, at least you know 50% of your audience. When my coordinator is planning, he will always tell me that total number of participants will be 40, and he's always sure who 20 will be for sure there, and then he's shooting for next 20. That's a normal process. So whatever you know to know, if I'm like, is there a more extension oriented, is it more farmer oriented, it is more training of the trainers, is it just the researchers from the university? That will help you set up the context.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Just one more thing on expectations, and that is I also always ask people when they come in at the beginning when I do names and introductions, also what do they expect to learn that day, and then I write it down on a flip chart. And no matter how good your advertising is about the purpose of the training, some people will come in thinking about a whole other thing. So right there, you're like, yes, I'm going to teach you this, and I'm going to teach you this, and we're going to do this, but no, we're not going to do this. And I can help you, point you to resources for that. So you can just like, you know, take care of that. Otherwise people are like stuck throughout the day. Oh, when is she going to talk about that? And then it never happens, and then they're upset.
If it is not in your topic list,
yeah.
Think of that immediately, quick think, and ask the local person that whom we can tell. Now, because this person has already traveled. He's going to sit there for a day listening to it.
Yeah.
And you are not covering the subject. So then you tell him, okay, I can connect you to resource A, B, C, or C be different.
Yeah.
And or how what you are presenting is going to be relevant to him. He can dig up something.
Yeah.
So divide the expectation into 2-3 big buckets. And those, because you will have one big time, normally in a day's workshop, you will have one big session in the morning, one big session in the second half of the day. So try to fit all that into your buckets so that get answered.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I guess we'll stop sharing. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Stop sharing. Close.